In September 1962, in the middle of the Cold War, President John Kennedy launched us on a new adventure.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
At Houston's Rice University, he issued the challenge.
The great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why did he want to climb it. He said, because it is there. Well, space is there, and we're going to climb it. And the moon and the planets are there, and new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. And therefore, as we set sail, we ask God's blessing on the most hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure on which man has ever embarked.
With new marching orders, NASA rapidly went to work. The launch complex at Cape Canaveral, Florida was expanded, and the agency announced plans for a manned spaceflight center with a new control room. During the Mercury and early Gemini flights, the missions were controlled out of rooms in Florida near the launch pad. NASA considered several locations for the new center. MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa and the Benicia Arsenal near San Francisco were near the top of the list. In the end, they chose land southeast of Houston.
What was once the furthest outpost on the old frontier of the West will be the furthest outpost on the new frontier of science and space.
By 1966, the flight of Gemini 4 was coordinated by Mission Control in Houston.
It's here in Building 30 where so much American history was made.
All over America, the stuff that would take us to the moon was being built.
At the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, you can still see the old Vehicle Assembly Building erected in 1966. It's here the Apollo capsule was mounted atop the Saturn V rocket. Launch Pad 39A, where the missions began, is preserved and still being used. The systems were designed at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. The command capsules were built in Downey, California. The LEM, which would land us on the moon, was built on Long Island. But it's in New Orleans where the giant boosters would come together at a place christened America's Rocket Factory. The NASA Michoud assembly facility was designed to build planes for World War II. In the 1960s, the Saturn V rockets were built, inspiring a new generation of space engineers, including Michoud director Lonnie Dutre, born just down the road.
Tell us about yourself, because you're a New Orleans boy.
Yes, I am, Warren. We're kindred spirits there. I got a job at Stennis Space Center, Mississippi, so I went out there and I seen the rocket engine test and I was hooked.
In the footsteps of Apollo, crews inside this historic structure are now building the next generation of moon rockets.
Artemis is America's return to the moon.
Teams are also building the Orion crew module.
We build those right here by Orion.
You'll see giant robotic welding tools, towering cranes, and massive equipment movers.
What's different is when we went to the moon, we went up there, it was their first time, we planted the flag, we did a few moon missions, and then we left. Artemis is our plan to put a permanent presence on the moon. So part of the Artemis mission going forward is we're going to put a gateway around the moon, if you hear that term, a gateway. And we just awarded that contract. So the gateway, I describe it as a mini space station that's going to orbit the moon. So in future missions, when the Artemis crew go to the moon, the capsule will dock with the gateway, and it's a habitation. And then there's a lunar lander that they can get in from the gateway, go to the moon. If you remember Apollo, they left part of the lunar lander on the moon. This one will all come back to the gateway, so they can go back and forth to the moon and land anywhere they want. And then the lander comes back to the gateway. When they're ready to leave, they'll get in a crew capsule and come home.
As the large tanks and rockets roll out of the factory, they're loaded onto barges to be shipped over to Florida, usually with a stop at Mississippi's Stennis facilities for testing.
When I said Back to the Future, these core stages are put on the barge. The first one was shipped to Stennis Space Center, put in the stands, same stands we used for Apollo.
Crews use cranes to slowly position the rockets. The massive size of everything makes that a daunting task.
They put this in the test stand and they fired all the engines.
It's a process as breathtaking as it is critical to America's space program.
You can't help but be excited to see, hey, you're going to the moon. When When we launch that rocket, that large Artemis rocket, and we actually go to the moon, that's when the public and the world's going to start paying attention again. I believe that excitement, and I see it now with some of the young folks on the program. Now we're doing things that we didn't do during the Apollo program. So that to me is going to be the big pull for the world and for this generation.